Jessica and fellow voracious readers. Sorry for being so informal right now. And I don't know, not having this camera on a tripod, but today has been a long day at school. And I just wanted to talk about books. So I'm gonna do that. And I'm not gonna put a lot of effort into it. So you'll just have to take me as I am. So, a book that I am currently reading is this one. And it is by Carlos Andres Gomez and it's called Man Up. It's a memoir. I'm like halfway through it and it's actually pretty cool. Carlos is a poet who actually came to my school last winter and I opened for him with my own poetry, which was really crazy, really awesome. And this memoir is definitely not something I could include in my future classroom because it has like 3 chapters just talking about his sex life. So like a good 100 pages of the 150 I've read so far have just been like, I had so many opportunities to sleep with so many different women, but I didn't. I've only slept with 6. Me, I've only slept with 6. And I'm like, Carlos, like I met you. It's like, I don't know, it's like reading your brother's diary and just finding out all these things. I mean, I've met Carlos Andres Gomez once, but it's a poet thing. Like you just get real connected, like real fast. So now I'm even more connected to him in many ways that I do not wish to be. So one book that I would actually consider having in my future classroom would be this one, and it's called Story Thieves. Here's what the cover looks like, and you can see that it's 2 people jumping into a book, and wouldn't you know it has to do with jumping into books. Story thieves, stealing stories. Yes, oh, good title. Good title, good fitting title. So the book is by James Riley, and it is, my guess is probably like a 5th grade reading level. Before I get into what the book is actually about, doing this one-handed, you can see that it's sort of double-spaced or like 1.5 spaced. It kind of looks like a college paper almost. And that ends up bumping it up to about 400 pages long, I think. And it definitely feels like it. Oof, that's no good. But anyway, the content of the story. So Bethany is a girl that has this superpower to jump into stories that are written. I mean, it can be either like a famous book or it could just be like someone makes up a story and writes it down on a napkin. Cool, totally fine. She can jump into that. And this is because she's half fictional and half human. And personally, when I discovered that, I'm like, oh no, Riley, you're giving hope to every person who's ever written a fanfic that yes, they can do all those things to that character. Oh god. So Bethany, unfortunately, gets spotted as she's trying to jump into a book. I believe it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and this kid Owen works at a library and he sees that she is up to some shenanigans and he says, hey, wait, can you jump me into a book? And she's like, okay, if it'll keep it quiet, sure. What book? He goes, oh, the Keel Nomenfoot Chronicles? I don't know, it's something like that. But it's sort of James Riley's parody almost of Harry Potter. It's a fictitious best-selling book series, and so Owen is like obsessed with this book series, and all he wants to do is to meet the main character, but then conflict arises because of course, and because Owen's a really selfish character and I found him very annoying just to add that in there. All he cared about was his own self-benefit. He didn't care that he was manipulating a story and completely changing it and ruining it for its future audience and putting Bethany in danger. He was just sort of like, alright, I'm gonna do only what I want to do and everyone else will have to suffer for it. But have no fear, because he did actually finally, slightly towards the end of the book, remedy this character flaw and start being more considerate of the people around him. Anyway, Owen jumps into his favorite book and he has to stay there and replace the main protagonist because that character gets like ejected from his own story, and then a villain is revealed who you might not think of as would be a villain. So, one plot that is sort of like a mini plot that weaves its way throughout this book is this idea of free will, which just feels like I'm in the Puritan age of like the 1800s or the 1700s, just talking about like manifest destiny and what have you, because it talks a lot about how, well, can't characters of a book pick their own future? Why does there have to be some writer who's controlling their fate? And I'm like, oh no, don't get religious on me. But it was a cool idea in concept. One thing that's cool about this book is that I feel like it does address the fan fiction concept, maybe without explicitly saying it, because this whole book is about putting yourself into the shoes of the main character or writing yourself into a story. And so I love this concept because to me, I feel like this is a book that I would maybe assign people to read, because I feel like it teaches kids to actively read and to actively insert yourself into the story and think, oh, okay, well, if I were in this character's shoes, would I have done the same thing or done something differently? Probably the biggest problem I had with this book is that it seemed like it had a lot of really cool ideas and the concept seemed really good, but it just dragged on for so long. And maybe that's also because I am 21 years old reading a book that's probably meant for someone who's 10. And I'm just picking it apart too much. But oh well, let's keep picking it apart. So another problem that I had with the book is I felt like it didn't leave a lot of room for the reader to make predictions. The plot felt very linear, and maybe this is also just the style of middle grade books, but every chapter ended on a cliffhanger that was immediately resolved for the next chapter. So maybe that was supposed to be sort of like heroin, getting them to keep reading so that they could keep finding out what's going on. But for me, it was just annoying, because maybe, and this is as a more mature reader, I want to see a problem that's established and that lasts longer throughout a book, so then I can start making predictions as a reader of like, oh, how could this problem be solved? Or, well, there are multiple different ways that this story could go. But instead, it just felt very streamlined, and because problems were resolved so quickly, it kind of didn't even encourage me to think. It made me a passive reader, but in an active way, like actively teaching me to put myself inside a story, but then also passively teaching me to just accept this spoon-fed plot. And also, this plot had so much going on, okay? It was a book inside a book, and it was this science fiction fantasy story. So I get it, like you're gonna have elements of science fiction and fantasy, but there were those elements all the time. There were robots, there was the internet, but like a parody of the internet. There was magic on top of it too. It was like this conflict between like magic and science, and that was all fine and dandy, but seriously, things were coming out of left field. Like, I didn't know the parameters of this world. So ultimately, this seemed like a very action-packed book, and unfortunately, that was the main reason to read. I didn't feel like there was much character development in terms of like human qualities or quirks. Like, the characters worked fine as two-dimensional book characters, but it was definitely the plot that you were reading for, which I think is still fine, especially at a young age, like 5th grade or 6th grade. And I do think that it has a really good payoff of teaching kids to put themselves inside of a story. I think that's really important, and I think the book does a really good job of teaching that. So ultimately, because I'm a sap, I probably would recommend this book too. I don't think I've been like real negative about any of the books so far, of the 3 books that I've talked with you about. Also, just as a heads up, I'm in a 6th and 7th grade English classroom for my teaching clinical observations, and it's pretty cute
because some of the 6th graders have already accepted me as an authority figure, and they are talking with me and being friendly, and I've only been there once. Only been there for one day. So maybe, depending on what books they end up bringing throughout the year, I'll have even more recommendations or even more ideas of what books to include in my future classroom. Or if you also want to join a book club with 12-year-olds, just tell me. I'm sure that'd be tons of fun. So much fun.